Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the second discussion of today. New materialities, interdisciplinary beading, featherwork, and tanning. And today we're very lucky to have Miranda Smitheram, Assistant Professor in Design and Computation Arts, as our moderator. Miranda, welcome. And I can help you with that mic too. Oh, on the top. Yeah.
I should remember that. Okay. Oh, good. Yep, we're mic'd up. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's really exciting to be here, and it's my pleasure to moderate the panel today for new materialities on interdisciplinary beading, featherwork, and tanning. So to begin correctly, tēnā koutou katoa, ko pikiwhara te moka, ko otako te awa, ko puki te roto tu roto, no mo opoko ahau. Ko kaitahu te iwi e takutaha tau iwi, no huatene, no airangi, no ko te rana ahau, ko Miranda Smitheram, taku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So hello 3 times and a really warm welcome to everyone. Pikiwhara or Sandy Mount is my mountain. Atako is the river. Puki te Roto is my lake. Outer Dunedin Harbour is where I'm from. Te Waipunamu, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kaitahu is my iwi. And I'm from other tribes also, Sweden, Ireland, and Scotland. And finally, my name is Miranda Smitheram. So I'm an assistant professor of material features in the Department of Design and Computation Arts here at Concordia. Also co-director of the Textile and Materiality Research Cluster and director of MASH Lab, both of which are at Milieu Institute of Arts, Culture and Technology. And lastly, but not least, I'm a proud member of the Indigenous Futures Research Centre. So I'm super excited for this discussion today, as materialities and ontologies are all that I think about and breathe. So here today, we've got some really fantastic panelists that we're going to get to hear and see some work from, and we're blessed to have the knowledge and the expertise of these thinkers and makers who are working across interdisciplinary fields and beading and tanning and featherworking. I don't know if that's the correct word, but I thought that was quite cute. So working with materialities that bridge temporalities, bridge time and linking with the past to futures and creating new understandings of, with and through material. So to introduce you, we'll start with Brooke. So welcome, Brooke. Brooke Rice is a Snipe clan of the Ganangay Haga Nation, born and raised in Ganawage. She is an auntie, a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, and a relative. She holds a BA in First People Studies and Human Relations. Currently pursuing her MA in Individualized Program at Concordia University, Brooke hopes to create a sustainable youth mentorship in her community based on traditional kinship systems, language of the land, and remembrance of traditional ways. Brooke is excited to work to help nourish relations and create accessible space for youth to attain wellness through language and culture. It's her dream to be part of youth's journey to honor the gifts and help create role models for the next 7 generations. Being an energetic snipe, she loves hanging out with her family and friends, eating scrumptious food, foraging, learning about sustainable energy, planting, seed saving, and hunting. Next, we have Sierra Barber. Sierra is an Upper Mohawk mixed European artist from Port Dover, Ontario, registered at the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. She graduated from OCAD University with a BFA in 2015, majoring in sculpture and installation with a minor in the Indigenous Visual Culture program. Sierra is currently pursuing an MFA in the painting and drawing program at Concordia in Montreal. Her work has been shown in the annual Indigenous Art Juried exhibition at the Woodland Cultural Centre and the Artist Project Untapped Contemporary Art Fair, and internationally in Aotearoa, New Zealand at Hoa Gallery. Sierra received the Elspeth McConnell Fine Arts Award through Concordia University with an internship at Daphne. Her work is represented at the Art Gallery of Hamilton's Art Sales and Service. And last but not least, we have Rodrigo D'Alcântara. I practiced and I did so much better when I practiced, forgive me. Rodrigo is a Brazilian artist, researcher, and curator, currently a PhD candidate and a sessional lecturer in art history at Concordia. His studies are supported by the Concordia University Graduate Fellowship and the Concordia International Tuition Award of Excellence. Rodrigo holds a Master's in Visual Arts from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro and a BFA from the University of Brasilia. His research focuses on counter-hegemonic narratives, syncretism, dissident methodologies, and queer experiences with international circulation in countries like Argentina, Canada, France, and the US. Additionally, D'Alcântara, it's just because I practiced. I was doing super well. Rodrigo has worked as a project manager and a research assistant in the Department of Visual Arts at Western University since 2022, and has curated independent projects at cultural institutions such as SBC Gallery and Oxygen Art Centre, supported by prestigious awards. So welcome. We're going to now have a bit of a 10-minute visual share from each of our artist researchers today to kind of give you a bit of an overview of their work. So I'm not sure who we have queued up to start.
We can start.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're starting with Sierra.
Yeah, okay. Okay, hi, I'm Sierra Barber. So I'm going to be kind of talking with you about interdisciplinary beading and sharing a bit of my practice with you. So my practice centers around interpreting my identity as being of Mohawk and mixed European ancestry. So I create work that combines oil painting and beadwork to create a single image that exists between two material languages. So imagery is depicted in a way that references my identity and my relationship to stories that I belong to. So I use vintage and new glass seed beads together that intersect with the colonial medium of oil paint. So yeah, I wanted to kind of pick up where the last panel kind of left off, the linguistic panel. So I like beginning with this piece because it sets the context kind of for where my story begins. So this is a piece that I collaborated with my dad on when I was like 8 or 9 years old. So he created it to process the passing of his grandmother, Isla Hill. So she was a residential school survivor. When he went to visit her for the last time, she reverted back to her first language, being Mohawk. So that was, a language that he didn't understand, were kind of the last conversation that she had with him. So after her passing and this experience kind of disconnection, my dad created masks using materials gathered from around her house and her yard. So this series was titled Unmasks, and the idea behind them was that they were meant to reveal rather than hide the realities and effects of the residential school system. So in this piece, it's titled Thief. My hands were painted red and pressed against the eyes of the mask, kind of in an act of pushing it away. So this is kind of where I'm starting, I guess. So this way of creating using materials as a form of language has been kind of a theme in my life since I was young. The language of my materials are very important in my decision making when it comes to creating concepts. The work that I'm currently doing is a fairly new process for me, but there are many interactions with materials that may not appear in the final work, but have shaped how I've arrived at this point. So my practice when I went to OCAD focused mainly on encaustic, which is a form of using beeswax as your paint. So beeswax is a preserver, and I had explored the concept of preserving and storing memories in wax. So my thesis used beeswax to create hybrids of artificial and organic concepts of personal memories, which became preserved yet fragile representations of online images. So I was kind of looking at the way I was using wax as like kind of like a pixel, but like an organic pixel, I guess. So this is like one of my final pieces for my thesis. This is the first layer of these like wax beads that I'm kind of dropping and created images with. So this series questioned the relationship that exists between memories in our mind and memories kept virtually. So my own digital reality was kind of pulled into a natural world and recreated using pixels of beeswax. So that's the full version. So that one was taken from Instagram. This one is kind of the opposite effect, where instead of building on the canvas with wax, I'm kind of carving into it like a honeycomb and then refilling it with wax again. So then from far away, it looks like some kind of hive that's kind of storing these memories. Okay, so then after my undergrad, I was kind of freely creating using wax in a similar process, but focusing more on texture and color and less on concept. So I find that when I learn the most from my materials when I'm just kind of freely creating and just kind of having fun with them and kind of seeing where they can go. So yeah, so I'm melting wax and building it up in layers. And I realized kind of later on this connection to the bead. I was just kind of intuitively doing this. And this process is kind of always something that I can go back to and draw from. And I still use my encaustic work as reference for my paintings that I'm making, which I'll kind of show you in a little bit. So this is encaustic as well. So in 2018, I worked at Inspire, and we did lunch and learns there. So this was the first time that I learned how to bead. So it was a raised strawberry on velvet. So I wanted to continue to learn. I liked the tedious work and that it connected me to my culture. So I learned more at the Native Cultural Center in Toronto, and then at the Indigenous Students Center at OCAD when I went to work there. So I'm starting to add kind of more imagery into my encaustic work as I'm also kind of learning to bead. So this, yeah, so these ones will come up again a little bit later in the paintings. So I've only been beading for a few years. I had hesitation about learning how to bead. But once I realized kind of how powerful it was for me to learn something that was meant to be taken from me, I embraced it. And it has now become a material for me to interpret my inner world. And now it's kind of like my comfort zone. So this one here, this piece, it's one of the first beaded pieces that I finished. It's done in flat stitch, and it's, yeah, flat stitch version of a beaded whimsy, which is usually done in a raised beadwork style that's unique to Haudenosaunee culture. So that's just an example of a beaded whimsy. So I'm, yeah, very inspired by this style of beadwork and the idea of like the mix of cultures, but also cultural survival through beadwork done in a kind of Western aesthetic. So yeah, during this time, I'm learning oil painting and beadwork. I kind of wanted to step away from the encaustic just because it was the pandemic. So I was moving, I was moving back home. So I wanted something kind of less messy to work with. And I was getting into beadwork, getting into oil painting. So I decided to put them together. So this beadwork is the first beadwork for my first oil painting that incorporates flat stitch. So I chose to work with both new and vintage beads within the beadwork that I create for my pieces because this combines the concept of the kind of continuation of the past within the present. So my first one, I only used vintage beads, but then I realized that I should be including new beads as well, like uh, ones that don't have a story yet to kind of bring them together, kind of to continue on a story together. So the vintage glass beads, which I source online from all over the world, add their own stories to the work, which also include surpassing bands of cultural expression. So the glass beads also symbolize European contact and trade. So I combine them both into the shape of a strawberry flower, which adds my story to this dynamic tradition. So this is the oil painting with the beadwork combined. So you can see that the image is existing within the two material languages. So yeah, so when creating my beaded paintings, I didn't want to just bead into a canvas. I knew that there needed to be a balance between the beads and the oil paint because both are such culturally loaded materials. And when thinking about the work in terms of identity, I didn't want one to carry more weight or power than the other, but rather reference the mixing of the two, like a mixed identity. So that's kind of why I chose oil paint over acrylic. So the main imagery that appears in my work for now would be strawberries, strawberry flowers, and a blue sky. So the strawberry is, yeah, heavily focused on in my work because it's a symbol of life. So it's the first berry to appear in the season, and it's also referred to as the leader of the fruit. So once I decided to kind of speak about my identity in my work, the strawberry became this kind of symbol of resilience for me. And it's like super vibrant. It kind of can't be missed. And it's kind of leading the way for more stories to follow. So this just still feels like the beginning for me. So this is just kind of like the beginning of a painting, just the drawing. I just wanted to show a little bit of the process. So the strawberry imagery exists between both mediums. The beadwork is attached to the canvas in a repeating pattern over the oil paint. So the patterns kind of reference ideas of repetition, cycles, and continuity, and kind of the state of being in motion, yet being connected at the same time. So each piece kind of shows many stories existing at once. In the process, I do the beadwork and then I'm matching the paint to the beading. It was kind of a process to figure out. At first, I was kind of doing a little bit of painting and trying to match the beads to that, and it was just kind of too complicated. So I'm getting the process down now. And that's a finished version. So the way that the color of the beads matches the paint is kind of making like the invisible visible, like the beading kind of acts as a lens in a way. So this one is another beadwork or the beadwork for another painting, sorry. I like kind of documenting it before it's attached to the painting just because this part of the work takes so much time just on its own to get to this point. So I just kind of like giving it its own moment before it's attached forever. This is a piece, so this is the painting for that beadwork, just in progress. I kind of paint around where the flowers are gonna go. And then this is the final with everything kind of attached. Then I have one more. So this is a work in progress. So I'm considering the beaded pieces, kind of looking at each beaded flower as a individual kind of portal that the viewer can look into and see a piece of a story that belongs to something bigger. So I was considering this idea because I'm living about like 7 hours away from my family. So I'm kind of taken out of my context, but I'm kind of bringing these stories with me kind of everywhere I go. So what you're seeing in this image is I'm working on earrings. So the idea is that the earrings will be, or the story will be able to kind of move with the body again and bringing it back to something wearable. Yeah, and that's all I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sierra.
Hi, everyone. Do you have my presentation? Sorry. Yes. Thank you for being here. I will present a little bit about the Tupinambá people. I will give you a short introduction because I know a lot of people here from the north don't have many knowledge or, like previous instruction about Brazilian indigenous nations. Let me just skip. Okay, sorry. So the Tupinambá or Tupi civilization used to inhabit the coastal area of Brazil, what we call Brazil nowadays. And it was actually named Pindorama by some of these indigenous nations. The very idea of the Tupinambá civilization is actually an European conception. It was kind of like a homogenization of these coastal nations, but then it became a signifier of this dialogues between these nations. So we still use this term to refer to all these different indigenous nations from the coastal area. It was a really complex society. Prior to the colonial encounter, there were around 1 million to 2.5 million indigenous people living in the coast. And usually they would have some similarities in terms of performance through rituals. Their ceremonial traditions involved dance, sound, movement, and adornment. And these here on the left are some examples of their architectural structures. It also followed a logic of hierarchy, and like the shaman would inhabit a specific shelter. So there were like specific activities going on in this type of architectures. It's a lot to grasp in a single presentation, but I will try my best. There is this really controversial topic regarding the Tupinambá people that is related to their anthropophagic rituals. This used to be a ritual in which they would use their featherwork practices. So the featherwork pieces were the protagonists of these rituals. But what we have nowadays, like when we go back to these primary sources, we have these really stereotypical representations of these rituals done by the colonizers and by the European missionaries that would go to Brazil. And we have a lot of not accurate representations of both the indigenous people and the ritual itself. As we can see, here on the left, we have some indigenous people splitting gold in the mouth of a colonizer. This is a reference to El Dorado, for example, to this narrative of zetification. A lot of them are depicted with European features as well. So, for example, Theodore de Brie, which was one of the main European illustrators of this age, never actually went to Brazil. So these depictions were done from some colonial statements done by other missionaries. And then we have these stunning featherwork mantles that used to be part of these rituals. What we can say for sure is that these rituals were related to the life-death spectrum. So they would always be war. They were war. They used to wear these mantles when they needed to do a funerary or to celebrate the life of a special member of the nation. And they were done in a really complex way with the technique of tapirage. There used to be an alchemical process in which they would take the acid of an Amazonian frog, and then they would change the colors of some feather pieces, and then they would actually reinsert the feather pieces into the birds to grow into different colors. So it was really complex, and mainly they have two parts. So it's the cape and the bonnet, and the bonnet simulates the baby bird, and the cape simulates the adult bird. And they used to be done mainly with the plumage of the guara bird, which is kind of like a ibis bird. And in Western terms, we would say that they are implicated with color and sound symbolism, because they would they would activate a network with the birds of the rainforests. And in these rituals, the shamans, the spiritual leaders, would be transfigured into a real bird in their mythologies. So they actually believed they would become birds during these rituals through the presence of the mantles. The mantles themselves are called asojabas in Nhangatu, which is the Tupinamba language. And asojaba is actually also an entity that lives in the spiritual world. So they are not only a featherwork object or artifact, but they are a living creature in the spiritual world. Also, like going back to these colonial representations of featherwork, we can see the presence of asojaba, of a Tupinamba mantle, but also how this type of colonial representations, which includes the royal entries, which were kind of like carnival parades that happened in the European countries in the 16th century until the 18th century, more or less. They would homogenize diverse indigenous featherwork pieces that came from so-called Americas. So here we have an example of an Aztec feather shield that was also present in one of these parades alongside the Tupinamba mantle. And they would like vandalize the sacred aspect of these practices. And then nowadays we have the return of the asojabas in contemporary times, mainly by the actions of Glyceria Tupinamba, which is this artist on the right. Since 2006, Glyceria Tupinamba has been trying to reenact this practice. She was trying to remanifest a Tupinamba mantle. And then finally she succeeded in 2020. But then this time around, the mantles only have aviary matter, aviary birds. Aviary matter from ground birds. So ducks, goosies, no longer the Guara bird that used to be present in their territories and is no longer there. But for her, it was a really, it is a material practice, but that touches upon immaterial layers as well, because she was only able to remanifest this mantles once she actually visited one of the ancient mantles that is present in one of the European collections. So nowadays we have 11 Tupinambá mantles from the pre-colonial times in European collections. And actually this year, we're gonna have the first indigenous repatriation in Brazil. So one of these mantles, the one currently in Copenhagen, is going back to Brazil and will be part of the National Museum of Rio de Janeiro collection. And it was all due to the hard work of Glycera Tupinambá as a Tupinambá activist. And the other only person that has activated this mantle is Cacique Babau, that is also from the Tupinambá of Olivença community in the southeast region of Bahia, in the northeast region of Brazil. And so like, it's a really complex network of agents that are involved in this remanifestation of the mantles of the Sojabas. Unfortunately, I didn't have an English version of this scheme done by Gustavo Caboclo, which is an indigenous artist from the Wapixana people. But it's a representation of how this remanifestation brings the reestablishment of ecological, ancestral, and social cultural balance for the contemporary Tupinambá cultures. And this is an example on how like the return of what we call art in the Western world can actually have a really impactful presence for the indigenous communities, because once the mantles returned, the wildlife of present in these territories also returned. So like some animals that were considered extinct, they also returned to these territories once they were able to do the rituals again with the mantles. And the whole community is implicated in the manufacture of these mantles. The women are the ones that sew together the mantle. And actually, once Glycera Tupinambá visited the European collection, she was able to notice that the technique called gerere, it was the same technique used by her grandmother to do fish nets. So she was able to reproduce the technique and to pass on this oral tradition for next generations. The children are always involved in the creation of the mantle as well, because they need to pick the honey from nature. So because like the glue used for the process of putting together the feathers and sewing them together in the gerere technique, it's done with honey. So the kids are the one in charge of, finding honey. And then of course, like they need to have chickens and other ground birds being part of their ecosystem so they can have the feathers. So it's like a really complex network that also is connected to the encantados, the enchanted ones, which are the entities connected to this practice. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Nice presentations, guys. What you showed almost looked like our longhouses. It's like we lived in the same type of structures. Doug. Well, welcome everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces. Let's all take a collective breath. And I tried to get my presentation proper. Sego sa gwego, katitsir da gwasyajat, so kanasiyo ni wakitero da dano, gahna wake ni te wakeno. Yawa dano namahe for your words and opening. So this is my deep dive. Gehiardas means to remember in Ganyagaha. Yeah, I was kind of marinating, like, what do I call this? So activating remembrance with Grandma Moon is what came. It's a protocol that we usually honor and acknowledge all of creation to bring our minds together as one. But I think Hannah or someone did that yesterday to open the space. And this is just a cool drawing my friend did on a pizza pie plate that he digitized. His name's Ikerson. He does amazing quill work. He is like amazing. He currently lives in Hawaii because he can't handle the snow. Yeah, this is my intro. I'll say it again. Dano. We're having technical difficulties. Kanya kahaga ni kanagara seroda, kahnawake ni dawageno, asaniwasa whisk na dawagasiriago. So all my English names mean they are Ray Sky, Brooke Rice. My Ganyagaha name is She Gathers the Flowers, and I'm a snipe clan, which is like a water bird that's really into everything. And it kind of manifests and plays into my life. I see the similarities now. I'm always in community initiatives and engagements and like a busy bird trying to get my beak into everything. And I've currently seen 35 winters. And yeah, that's a picture of my little niece and myself working on a moose hide. Gahnawage. So around that red line is where I reside in Gahnawage. And I get to hang out and swim in the St. Lawrence. My uncle fishes those waters. He has sturgeon nets. I get to pick medicine in these lands. The deer is depleting, but you can see a surrounding area. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of farmland. You can see the contrast of how Indigenous people are custodians of the land and how we care for the land. It's a lot more green than outside of our community. That's where I live. And Akwadzire means my family. The root word of that is Odzire, which is our fire. And each and every one of us has a fire in us that we're supposed to be burning bright, keeping the flame alive. It's a strong ember. And this is what makes up my existence as an auntie, a sister, a granddaughter, a daughter. Those are all the faces I get to see all the time. And these are my grandparents. On the left is my maternal side. My grandmother's Sicilian. I never met her. Her name's Irene Vincelli. And my grandfather met her while he was ironworking in New York City. A lot of our men used to travel every week to go and be building skyscrapers, leaving their families and only coming back on the weekends. So that's where he met my grandmother in Brooklyn. And that's my paternal side on the right, Jimmy and June McCumber. So out of all four, only Junie's alive. She's 84, I believe. And yeah, they make up my story and who I am. And this is a little bit of my journey. I had to do my baptism and first communion because some political reason in our community, it was like hard to get a status card, or I don't really know the history. I blame my parents that there was a finger crossing my third eye. But yeah, I like to keep that picture. It's so funny. And it just shows the journey. I went to elementary school in Kahnawake. But then I journeyed off the reservation and I went into a non-native school for high school. And this is a little of the indoctrination and enfranchisement. I went to Vanier. I learned a lot of Western academia, high math, science. I wanted to go into health. want to own a pharmacy. And then I took a minor at Concordia in Indigenous Studies. I wanted to see like what would Concordia teach me about my people, and it was the Indian Act. That's a fully loaded document, and it really struck a chord with me to see the statistics, the data on the language loss and just the horrific acts created by the government and this federal document. So I left Concordia and I went to Radio Nanirdas. That's the top right picture. It's a 2-year Ganyageha language immersion program, which was the best decision of my life because I really understood and did a deep dive of who I am as a Ganyagehaga woman, as a Snipe Clan woman, my roles and responsibilities, but really just being immersed in the language is poetic. Like our language is alive. You just look at the world in a different lens. And I was able to understand more of ceremony, cultures, tradition. I was able to attend Longhouse, which I didn't grow up in that type of environment. I believe I was in my late 20s. But yeah, just being able to immerse myself into the language, into the culture, to know why I'm dancing, to know what we're giving thanks to. Because sometimes I would go and have no idea what they're saying. And I just felt really lost. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? And amongst this journey, I struggled with addiction and I started sobering up, letting go of alcohol, I would say my late 20s. And in one of those moments, I was thinking about my grandparents that passed. And I was thinking like, am I living an honorable life? Am I making my ancestors proud? What am I doing to carry a good light, a good spark? What kind of path am I paving for my little nieces and nephews looking up to me? So one night I was just sitting outside looking at Grandma Moon, and she was so full and she was so bright. And I just start talking to Grandma Moon and asking like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What are my gifts? And in our creation story, I'm not sure if too many people know about it, but in the story, there's 2 twins that are birthed. One comes out of her side, killing the mother, who is Sky Woman, and one comes out regular. And they always fight, they bicker, and the left-handed twin ends up tearing the mother's head and throwing it up into the sky. And that's in our creation story. She becomes Grandma Moon. And then, I think I skipped a part, but as Sky Woman falls, she ends up landing on that turtle's back. And because she's so grateful for that turtle for catching her, she ends up assigning the design and the layout of the turtle shell. And if you look closely, there's the 12 scoots and the 28 days. So this kind of became my methodology into my work. I really wanted to embody research. I wanted, because of the duration of going to school in a non-native community it was very cerebral. I had a hard time. Like I didn't see myself in the work. I didn't see myself in the books. So I really wanted to like change the direction of what Indigenous research looks like through embodiment. And yeah, like Grandma Moon became my methodology, my guiding force. I do a lot of new moon work, full moon. I plant the gardens with the moon phases. So this is some of our months. There's 13, and it's definitely not following the Gregorian calendar, but I made this in one of my classes. This follows our ceremony of cycles that connect to the land and what we're doing. So we just passed our midwinters. We stirred the ashes, which is really symbolic to start our new year, to start fresh, to let everything in the past go so we can fill back our cups in a good way. And for this discussion of tanning, it was a dream of mine to harvest a moose and make moccasins from start to finish, to not buy leather that was chemicals or to not even buy leather at a store, to really be in the process. So yeah, I knew I would need connections. I knew I would need to build relations with knowledge keepers. So I had to go in the community and just ask people like, who's going to bring me hunting? Who's going to teach me how to tan? So that dream was in 2018. I went hunting in Listaguch and I saw a lot of people tanning. And that's where the seed planted. Then come full circle, that picture is just this past fall. Some friends brought me hunting and I harvested a moose and now I'm gonna make moccasins. And all these other pictures are just what the embodiment of the land-based programming does and what it means to reactivate remembrance by including elders, knowledge keepers. Yeah. So there's a turtle rattle up there. That's a part of our seed songs. When Sky Woman fell, she brought really old ancient songs that we still sing today. I never learned them. I recently just start learning them because I asked Grandma Moon, I said, let me release all shame, let me release all guilt. I want to be able to absorb seed songs. And sure enough, I'm able to sing 3 to 4 different songs at ceremony. And it's been amazing. Just like this whole journey of alchemy by turning earth into a pot or skin into leather, a tree into a basket. This is a black ash basket. What else do I have to show? Oh my God, am I over 10 minutes? So, okay, to focus on tanning, here is a lot of the people who have helped the journey of tanning. I'm currently involved in a Buckskin Babes collective. It's a bunch of students from Concordia. We got together a few years ago and it's at the Indigenous Student Center. There's a few of us saying, oh, my cookum used to do that, or my auntie does that work. And like, how cool would it be to just tan hides? And that collective has been birthed. And it's taken us a lot of places. We met a lot of faces all across Turtle Island. And a big component is just relationships, reciprocity, storytelling, food, ensuring that there's like, we're caring for each other, make sure you're drinking water, make sure you're stretching your body. Just real big medicine. And it's even extending my relations to community members. This was just in the highway of Ganawage. The teachers at Guardianoha reached out. They're like, we heard what you're doing. Can we bring our class? And it was all in Ganyagaha. And it was so nice just to hear the kids speak the language and their excitement. Some of them were grossed out. Some of them loved it. Some of the parents said, what'd you teach my kids? I have to go hunting. And then the other picture on the left is the language immersion program now. So it's just a really cool full circle cycle. And that's what I'm finding out about Indigenous Ungwehuenaha epistemologies. It's not linear, it's very circular. There's no timeline. It's like this Indigenous continuum. Here's my sister Autumn. Some of the tools we use, nothing goes to waste. We use the bones, the hide, the ligaments, everything. And there's a little link there, Doug, if you could just click it. I have a 1 minute little cute corny video. Hope it works. While we're waiting, I can pass around an actual piece of smoked hide so you can interact with it, smell it, touch it, feel it.
Blood. I'm with the fam when we grew in the trenches. Being res kids and we hopping over fences. Living up the land, what you know about that? Really selling caviar, got me counting stacks, yeah. Pull up to the show like I'm about to pull a cross. I don't like the bandit guns, you know I'm the boss. I'll just hold it down so we will never fall. Pulling out my status card when I'm at the mall. 38 can't never break a treaty. Feeding on my people, never been greedy. Don't be a gunner, acting all needy. I'm on the creek, so claiming to feed me. Down at the creek, jump in and swim. At cat still spin all the fish. Take it back, mom, gon' cook up the dish. Living up the land, you know how we live.
And there's the moose I hunted. Almost done. Yeah, I think I have one last slide and the resolution on that was pretty bad. Okay, let me see. I have one more slide. Oh yeah, so overall, it's just been a lot of big medicine, a lot of big medicine. Like everything I've learned was through reaching out, building relationships. I forgot to mention that my grandfather on that slide, he was the one who instilled traveling. He was really big in lacrosse. He would make wooden lacrosse sticks and he would travel anywhere and everywhere for a lacrosse game. So he really instilled that into me, not even knowing, because all over the Confederacy, different communities, really loving that face-to-face interaction to share space, songs, stories, that ecosystem that you get to share with one another. And this, my little beading is coming to fruition. My dream and goal is to make my mom some moccasins. I don't know if you can see that. From start to finish, that'll stay in our family as an heirloom. Those ones are gonna be mine, actually. These are gonna be my mom's, and there's a nice story with the rainbow in there, the number of kids with each dome. Yeah, the rainbow represents two spirit ones in our family, the flowers, her journey. Yeah, I think I have no more slides. Oh, yeah, I want to ask the audience, how can you use your gifts for the collective liberation to have more joy? Because all this work has brought me a lot of joy. And it was always collectivity, like it wasn't a solo journey at all. I had to barter, trade, share gifts, wake up early, really put in the work, a lot of work, to have that recognition and acknowledgement through our knowledge keepers. And Tokniyoanage, Yamakoa.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. I had a million questions actually written down, but I believe that we only have time for maybe one question and a question or two from the audience. But that was just really fabulous to hear, see, and get a sense even of smell with the honey and the beeswax and the things. The skins, these kind of palpable and tangible senses of the materialities that you're working with. And it's hard for me to kind of circle back to try and pick now just one question to open up to the panel. But I had been thinking a lot about new materialities and what that means for us as material practitioners who come from Indigenous perspectives. And I was thinking about these tensions there and how we sort of see Indigenous materialisms as fitting as part of a field through which new materialism itself has been materialized or thingified, as Karen Barad describes. And, you know, the feminist theorists who kind of coined this phrase were kind of thinking that they were bringing together an opposition to these existing concepts of a divide of binaries, right? Of course, between nature and culture, and separation of person and place, and human and more than human. And we can understand, and you've shared many examples with us of how Indigenous thinkers, scholars, and makers have long pre-existing ideas about non-human agency and the liveliness of things, and a sense of recognition between the abilities of and sensibilities of objects, of things, and those of humans. So like ko'au te awa, like ko te awa ko'au, I am the river and the river is me, or Rodrigo's example of the shaman becoming the bird. So when we sort of try and understand what Indigenous knowledge has in preceding new materialism, I thought it'd be good to start from this kind of broader sense and ask you if you could share how you understand maybe some of that divide between perspectives of these Western orientated theories of new materialism and pre-existing understandings of the agency of thing, from agency of things, the liveliness of things, from Indigenous knowledges, and what you think about can be generated from those encounters. Big question. So thinking about the framing of new materialism as being Western-centric, feminist epistemology theorists coming up with this concept, going, we've invented a new thing. It's called new materialism. It like breaks down the divide between subject and object, nature and culture, human and more than human. And then a lot of the argument from Indigenous scholars and researchers is like, we already thought of that stuff, like that already exists. You've described it in your practice. You've described it in your practice. You've described it in your practice. So I was wanting us to sort of think about what you think about how that encounter between those two things, or tensions between those two things, those two perspectives, can be brought together. Any thoughts?
Okay, so I think that personally, we've always been astronomers and mathematicians and artists and scientists, architects, and Western academia is just catching up to us because we're oral historians, and you can see it in like ancient ruins, the way they line up things to our constellative ancestors. Like to a T, the sun solstice, the winter solstice, the stars. So that's my perspective. They're finally catching up.
That's great.
I guess like I can talk from an artistic perspective, like, and like how it, like the so-called artifacts play a role in the museums and in the collections. So I guess this is a big challenge as well, like to navigate the art world, having in mind this kind of spiritual matter that is embedded in the idea of indigenous objects, and how it's like involved with societal values and culture and many other layers that are not part of an idea of commodification. So I think like a big difference is how like indigenous objects, they are kind of done in a way that they are always part of a circuit of the community and of the ancestors. And in the Western perceptions, it's about commodifying, and it's reduced to the value, like the use value of it. And I guess that's the biggest challenge, like how to respect the agency of these objects that are embedded with a soul or with ancestral matter. And yeah.
Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah. Sierra.
Yeah, I guess like for me, I guess I like starting with kind of the mask that I showed at the very beginning of like using materials as a way of language, a way of understanding. So I feel like that was something I kind of like grew up kind of understanding, and I was able to kind of bring into my my own work. So even before I was doing like beadwork or something considered kind of more traditional to my culture, I can still see that those ideas exist in the beeswax work that I was doing, just kind of, I don't know, like intuitively, because that way of thinking is already part of who I am. So it's going to appear in the work, I guess. And with the work that I'm doing now, which is combining the two material languages, I like having the image that exists between both of them. So to kind of like break down, I guess, like that binary of thinking also, because like talking with other like friends or other like kind of mixed people with mixed backgrounds, they kind of relate to that work in the way where it's like I can't pick and choose which part of myself is this or that. It's all kind of together.
Excellent. Yeah, some great thoughts. Do we have time? Yeah, I think sounds okay. So we've just got time for one question from our audience. Bearing in mind, if you don't have any questions, I still have a list of about 10 myself. I can pick an easier one.
So throughout the presentation, you guys were talking a lot about learning new materials, learning how to work with them, and also talking about like animacy inside of these materials as well. So I was just wondering, in your process, were there any conversations with your materials or lessons that those materials taught you? For example, like did high tanning or beadwork or feathering teach you something as part of that ongoing conversation with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't like maybe pinpoint one specific thing that it has taught me working with those materials, or especially beadwork, but it feels like more of a way, I don't know, for me to be able to like, yeah, speak through the materials in a way. I feel like it's, oh, sorry. Yeah, I was saying it feels more like a way for me to speak through the material in a way, but I also feel like, I don't know, yeah, it's like a back and forth. There's communication between both of us somehow. Yeah.
So in my case, I actually don't do featherwork. I am studying this millennial practice. But I guess like what drew me to study the Tupinambá legacies, like I have a mixed background as well, but in Brazil, we were really raised from our origins, our indigenous origins. I have indigenous heritage from both my families, but we don't know the origins, like the communities that we came from. And so for me, I would say that actually what dialogues from my creative process in relation to the Tupinambá legacies is this connection with spirituality and with dreaming as a channel. And yeah, like so like Glyceria Tupinambá, she could only manifest the Assojabas through her dreams as well, and dialoguing with the entities. And since I am a child, I am a medium, and I always talked with spirits, and I always, like saw these presences, like even in real life, like with my own eyes. And I actually didn't know them, and now I know them. I know who they are sometimes because I am studying. And so like for me, it's more like accessing this oniric matter and how this can result in a creative process or in an artistic piece. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so the moose hide's definitely gonna teach you patience, resilience, give you a sore back. And yeah, you just get to learn a lot. It's really intimate process to be able to harvest from the land and then know that in our way, they say we're not taking a life, that animal is giving us their life so we can sustain and feed our families, and then utilize their skin to make moccasins or jackets, mukluks. And yeah, it's a really intimate, beautiful process. It's you gotta come work on a hide. It's so it teaches you a lot. It teaches you like where the organs are, because it'll be more hard to scrape and work where the kidneys are because there's more fat protecting the organs. you just learn so much. And then each animal's brain is the right size to tan a hide. So there's like science in there, chemistry, and then you're learning about botany and arbitoriums, because you have to harvest certain trees to use the tannings in the trees to tan and smoke the hide. So there's a whole teaching. And then as I was learning from our beadworkers, I ended up learning that my great grandmother was a beader. I was like, why am I so good at this? Like a lot of people's beadwork I was in class and they're like, you're just getting it. And then my mom told me, yeah, your great grandmother used to bead. And then sitting in those circles with other beading biddies, we would just sit around the table, tell stories. And someone said that we started raised beadwork to actually like hide our seeds and to put our seeds in so they wouldn't attack them, because there was like this Sullivan campaign that burned all our cornfields. So it's definitely been a journey, a lot of teaching. Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to have to stop there because we've gone over time. But there has just been so many inspirational insights and across thinking, making and being shared by you all today. So thank you very much for that. I particularly love that you shared with us about being in conversation and dreaming and touch and in relation with materials. So thank you to our panelists, to Rodrigo, to Brooke, to Sierra, for sharing their thoughts and processes on materiality.
Okay, thanks everyone. We're going to take a break now and we'll be back at 4 o'clock for Abundant Intelligences, Indigenous Knowledges, and AI.